lovers. Thank you for joining us for this first broadcast of Page Turners, a production of Caribbean Book Club in association with IKTV. The mission of this Page Turners project is very simple. We hope to persuade you that the books we love are worth your time and convince you that you should read them. My name is Paula David. I'm from St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Jamaica, and I'm a member of Caribbean Book Club. The other people you see on your screen are also members of Caribbean Book Club. They are Eric Michael Washington, Raul J. Williams, Kesawa John, and Anthony Regisford. The book we're going to discuss today is Monique Roffey's The Mermaid of Black Conch. Before we get into the discussion about the book though, Raul J. will tell you a little bit about Caribbean Book Club. Raul J., over to you.
Hello, everyone. As Paula said, I'm Raul J. Williams, and I'm originally from St. Kitts and Nevis, but I currently reside in Scotland. The Caribbean Book Club was founded on Facebook, and it currently has a membership of 744 members. Our sole purpose is to read books by Caribbean authors, hence the name. We meet via Zoom every first, second, and third Sunday of each month. And on the first Sunday, we discuss books of poetry or poems by Caribbean authors. On the second Sunday, we would have our Bring Your Own Book, which is a little less structured. Each attendee tells the book club about a book they read or a book they like, which they believe other members of the book club should read. And on the third Sunday, which is our most popular, we discuss our book of the month. Our last book of the month was The Mermaid of Black Conch, which we'll be discussing today. And as I said, that is our most popular meeting. And we do emphasize and encourage everyone to attend all of our meetings because they're usually very, very insightful.
Thank you, Raul J. Now I'm going to turn you over to Eric, who, for context, will tell you a little bit about the novel we're going to discuss today. Eric, over to you.
Thank you, Paula, and hello, everybody. The Mermaid of Black Conch, 2020 novel written by Monique Roffey, who was born in Trinidad but resides in Great Britain now. And it tells the story of a Taino woman who was cursed by a group of women on her home island hundreds of years before the arrival of Columbus. So it weaves stories and legacies of the politics of gender, of love and freedom, and the legacies of colonialism, the legacies of slavery, and all set within a contemporary Caribbean context.
Thank you very much for that. All right, so we can get into the heart of the matter now. We'll start with a really easy question for everybody. Kesawa, since you haven't spoken yet, perhaps you could answer first. What did you like about the book most? What did you most like about the book, and why?
Wow, start with the easy question, shall I? Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on what time this is airing. Hello. I enjoyed the language, actually. I think the style that she writes in, she really brings to life a kind of particularly Caribbean way of using English. And that is music to my ears. I really love the way that they speak. Very early on in the story, they address that everybody speaks in what they call Black Conch parlance. There's a particular way of structuring grammar, of choosing words, and that I think really is very vivid. It's very vivid. It very vividly evokes Caribbean speech patterns in all their diversity, but particular ways that they don't sound like I sound, for example. I really like the language of the book. I also like the fact that in a very simple love story, the writer really evokes almost all of Caribbean history, some of the broad strands, the Taino people, their destruction and genocide, the arrival of Europeans who imported enslaved Africans, and then the current predicament of Caribbean people who have to live with these histories. The book does a wonderful job of jumping back to 1976 and thinking about how the hopes of that first independent generation, and then looking at where they are now with the arrival of these. And although they also talk about the Americans and their influence already at that time, as it's the Americans who fish this woman and treat her like an object and hope to sell her, and the arrival of kind of capitalism and how that corrupts people and relationships. Sorry, I'm talking a lot, but there are a lot of things I like about the book. The language really jumps out at me, but also the way that it encapsulates really big things in Caribbean history in what's a very simple story that anybody can get into. And it's a beautifully written book. It's a wonderful story. I really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Kesawa. Tony, we haven't heard from you, so perhaps you could also tell us what you like most about the book and why.
Well, I think both Eric and Kesawa, Eric in his sort of summary, and Kesawa in that little synopsis as well, did it quite nicely for me. What I liked about the style, the writing, it was very simple, easy book to get into. You sort of slide into the pages and, you keep turning. The topics that were dealt with, or the areas of the book that Kesawa quite rightly mentioned, people before our time, the indigenous people, and how that person came back to be from, a legacy into contemporary living, and brought into a sharp focus two passages of our history. One, the indigenous people, and two, the colonialism part of our history. And I thought those are the two most important bits that that really grabbed me. I tell you why, Paula, the Taino people is of such interest. Here in St. Vincent, we have an active population of these people. And they too have been at the brunt of discrimination, not just from the people who tried to kill them out, they not just from the perpetuators of the genocide, but interestingly, we as Black people have been discriminatory to those people, and I think it's something that you need to grapple with. We were taught this, and we bought it hook, line, and sinker about the indigenous people being cannibals and warlike and all that. So being able to come back with the knowledge of what I have today and look at how Monique dealt with the Mermaid, representing that part of my past was very, very, very interesting. So I liked the other characters in the book. They were far from prosaic. Everybody had a colorful life, which really, quite intriguing. So I'll leave it there because I don't want to talk for the whole program.
Thank you very much for that, Tony. Roger, would you like to give it a go?
Oh, yes, definitely.
What did you like best about the story and why?
I think I'll have to agree with most people in terms of the historical perspective presented in the book. I am very biased towards nonfiction traditionally, and so I like books that are fictional but could easily be applied to a non-fictional setting, if that makes sense. And in this book, there are so many aspects of history that came across in the book, from the indigenous people to slavery and colonialism, even empire as well, that came across in the book. But for me, what really stuck out was the modern historical perspective in the book, and the references and the relevance to the situation. For those of you who have read the book, you would have realized quite early in the chapter that they mentioned that Chocolates and Sparrow were playing on the radio, and I found that really interesting. Not only as a calypso lover, but also a lover of history, and it was really relevant in that sense because in 1976, the year that this particular scene was taking place, Chocolates won the Calypso Monarch in Trinidad and Tobago for the very first time. And so, he would have been the hot thing on the radio in 1976. So I found that, Ruffy really took her time to develop these scenes, develop the characters, and I particularly like that in this book. It was well written, and it was a page turner for me. No pun
And she
intended.
also discussed Bob Marley. There was also this discussion of Bob Marley, Steel Pulse,
Yes. Toots and the
Aswad,
Maytals. Yep.
Toots and the Maytals.
Yeah.
There's somebody I'm forgetting, but there are lots of the really hard-hitting reggae and calypso acts of the time are mentioned in the book. Eric, how about you? What did you like most about the book and why?
Yes. Actually, I didn't tell everybody where I'm from. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, the Northern Caribbean. But what I really loved about the book was the richness of the historical context, and having the book focused on an indigenous woman who was cursed to be a mermaid hundreds of years before Columbus arrived, and just her own struggle with memory and recovering what was her indigenous culture, and then seeing it brought to contemporary life in 1976 on an unnamed island in the Caribbean was very it was arresting to me. It grabbed my attention. It caused me to empathize with those who were in the Americas before the arrival of Europeans and the arrival of us who are African, of African descent, and came as enslaved persons. And I think that really drew on me. And I love the cultural references, as y'all mentioned. I love the references to the Calypsonians, the reggae, the rock steady, all of that. She just weaved it in together and told a very rich and engaging story.
I guess that leaves me. Kessa kind of stole my thunder because I'm a language person too. I loved the language. It was evocative. I mean, it appealed to all five senses. That was amazing. But what I really loved about the language was the politics of language. I don't know if this is what the author intended, but what I took from it, because this is a novel written both in Metropolitan English and in Trinidadian Creole. And it's not just dialogue that's in Creole. Narrative is written in Creole too, which is something I see more and more Caribbean writers doing. And what I think that signals is that we're more comfortable in our skin now. We're no longer apologizing for our language. We are saying our language is as lively, it's as rich, it's as vivid, it's as valid as Metropolitan English. And that is why it made me feel so good to read this language with lots and lots and lots of narrative written in a Caribbean language. I wanted to take Tony on about something he said about us as African people discriminating against indigenous people. I wonder if you could give us, Tony, if you could clarify what you mean, because I'll tell you why I need you to clarify. I see a lot of people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Tony and I are both in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, celebrating our indigenous heritage. And in fact, my daughter and I did DNA tests, and it showed, because her father is Vincentian, has Vincentian ancestry. I mean, I am Vincentian by both, not by birth. So I don't have the indigenous ancestry. But when my daughter's DNA test came back, it showed her up as indigenous as she is Jewish. My grandfather is Jewish, and her father's grandfather is indigenous. And it was very exciting. So to see the DNA results, but I was also jealous of her because I didn't have any indigenous DNA. And the way I felt about it is, if you have indigenous DNA, nobody can tell you to go back to where you come from, because this is where you come from. And I felt so jealous. So so that is what I see. I see the celebration, Tony. But perhaps you know something I don't, having been raised in this
Yeah, Paula.
society. I mean,
Paula,
yeah.
The celebration that you see is relatively recent. And it's a good thing, because it speaks to a level of consciousness moving in the right direction. But, you know, I'm 63 years of age, so let me just put that into context. And 20, 30 years ago, maybe even more recent than that, the people who are the Taino descendants were just blanketly called Carib. Everybody was a Carib, as if they were nameless. Once they had the features, that's how we refer to them, Carib. Okay, that's the first thing I'll tell you. One of the ways in which these people were discriminated against as well, or spoken of in derogatory terms, the women. You know, the women were looked at as sexual objects, more so than the normal objectification of females. We have a problem with that, period. But I'm saying this was more so for Carib women, as if they had, all they were good for was sex. Get a Carib woman and you're all right. You know, go across the Dry River. Let me just tell you, Eric and Royal J and Kessawa, these Carib people we're talking about, these Taino people we're talking about in St. and the Grenadines, after they fought with the English, and the English finally, well, I don't even want to use the word conquered, but the Caribs were banished to the extremities of St. and the Grenadines, way up in the north under the foothills of the volcano. And there is a geological feature, what we call a dry river, that demarcates almost like a boundary beyond the dry river. That's where you find them. Okay, and it almost has a sort of a, Paula, that dry river demarcation almost makes you feel as if that is not, when you go past the dry river, it is not St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It's in our subconscious, as if these people are not really us. They're there, okay? So there's not that full integration. So while on the one hand, I agree with you that there's this celebration, there's still a heavy weight in terms of how integrated the mermaids people are. I mean, just to bring it back into the context of the book. So I still feel there's a lot of work to be done.
Okay. All right. Okay, so let's go into another question about the book. Did anything about the novel surprise you? If so, what and why? Who wants to take that one? Raul J, you look alert. Did anything surprise you about the novel? And if so, what and why?
So I think it would definitely have to be the sexual references and the almost sex-crazed nature of the way the men are presented as almost like very sex-craved. And even though they're there to fish, it seems as if, you know, getting this mermaid or getting this woman is more important than fishing, because, you know, as the story played out, the Claysons, who were the white fishermen, I assume that they were there to get fish, but there was no mention of them actually catching any fish for consumption. It was just them being focused on this mermaid the entire time, you know, from they got her onto the line, and there's never any more mention of them getting any fish for consumption. So I think that was a bit shocking, because I didn't expect that. And even from reading the summary of the book before actually getting into the book, I never expected, you know, such sexual references to come out in the book. But I found that they were very relevant and well placed for the storyline.
I think the whole notion of not catching fish for consumption, I think that was very deliberate. I think Monique Roffey is saying to us that these are sports fishermen, and she's also saying that they don't respect nature. So I think that is why she framed this story that way. Kesawa, did anything about this story shock you or surprise you, and why? Not necessarily.
Many things surprised me in good ways. I think one of the things that, to pull onto that earlier point of Roger's, I think in that scene where, or the set, the part of the novel where they talk about the catching of the mermaid, and I hope, are we allowed to give spoilers? Okay, they catch her.
Try not to.
At the very beginning. Okay, but this is like the premise of the whole book. It's not really a spoiler. I think the way that they describe how the different people react, I thought that was really interesting. When they first hook her in and they realize that they've caught a mermaid rather than a fish, the different reactions. So the father of the white father is like, we're going to make money off this. And he's going to turn his son into a man. And there's all these references to the sexuality of the son, meaning that he's weak-willed and he needs to be taught to be a man. And this trip is all about his own masculinity being affirmed through this sort of manly, like you say, sports fishing event. And the son, who's kind of rebutted his father's kind of treatment of him, is suddenly, and this, when the opportunity presents, suddenly buys completely into it. This woman will make a man of him. This mer woman will be the woman that he loves. He'll be the man his father wants him to be, that perhaps he secretly desires to be. And then it all kind of falls apart when, and also there's that guy who is really gross, is what I'll say. And there's all this kind of talk of conquest, and this kind of, that description of sexuality, I think, surprises me in the context that it's written by a woman. And I wonder if a man would have written it that way, or if it's a very much a woman's take of maleness and masculinity and sexuality from a male perspective. I thought that was quite interesting as a choice of the author. I suppose another thing that surprises me is that I really enjoyed was the way that, and this isn't a spoiler, the arrival of the mermaid really disrupts the small town that they live in, or the small island that they live on. But what she almost highlights is that while everybody has the impression that nothing happens here, actually there are always these kinds of disruptions. 10 years earlier it's one thing, and 10 years later it will be something else. But actually there's a facade or a veneer or a belief that not much happens here. But actually, when one thing happens, sort of things spiral and lots of other things happen as a result of it. And that actually isn't as infrequent as the inhabitants themselves perceive it to be. And I think that was a really interesting sort of way of thinking about life on a small island, because we think it's quiet doesn't mean it's really that quiet. Those are things that surprised me. There are others, but
would you like to take on this question? Sorry, Eric, would you like to take on this question? What surprised you about the novel, and why?
Yes, one thing that surprised me was the character of Arcadia Rain. She's a, lack of a better term, a white Creole woman. She speaks in Black Conch English, and she's tied to the land in terms of ownership, but she's also tied to the land in terms of people. I mean, she's related to, seem like half the village, and so that surprised me in the sense that I wasn't expecting that. Not that I'm ignorant of that type of dynamic, especially in a Creole setting, being from a Creole, a Creole place myself, and knowing those ties. But another thing that with her character that I was a little bit surprised about was the level of empathy that she had, and she was willing to, not dismiss the past, but move in a constructive way from the past. I think she's a character that is seeking to reconcile the past in her present.
So, Paul, if I may,
Yes, go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, because I didn't want to lose my thought on the last sentence or so that Eric spoke about. Arcadia Rain, to me, was a central part of the book, yes, but she was an apology for the legacy of colonialism, and the author, I believe, comes from a similar background, and I feel she herself may be grappling with that. The fact that what took place under colonialism, the people who live with it today and who have inherited the spoils, who have inherited the privilege, feel in some way, some of them feel in some way embarrassed, okay, about it. And I think that's how Arcadia Rain was being portrayed, okay? She is symbolic of all that you see in these Caribbean islands, where fair-skinned or white people have privilege. And let's not beat about the bush, okay? We don't like to talk about it, but it's real. And her owning all that land, which she was seemingly quite prepared to give up, was, like, to me, symbolic of an apology.
Yes. Can I jump in?
I agree with you on that. Sorry, go ahead, Kesawa.
I wonder if we're going to say the same thing, Paula. I also felt that on reflecting on the character, on first read, she's a very empathetic character, very sympathetic character. You're like, oh, isn't that great? This white woman is ready to give away all this land for love and healing. It's wonderful. But on second read, I was like, it's kind of convenient, isn't it? That the one white person in the whole novel who gets a book is like one of the good ones. Like the one white voice who represents a kind of authentic local voice conveniently had nothing to do with enslavement. Her ancestors arrived after enslavement, and so they never had slaves. Like it's a choice that a writer makes.
That was exactly the point I was going to zoom in on, Kesawa. That was for me a cop-out. Saying, creating this character, Arcadia Rain, who is a white Caribbean person, but my ancestor never owned no slave, so I ain't too bad. I think that was a cop-out, and it bothered me. I don't know if anybody else felt that way about it. Because I think if you want to describe, all right, Monique Ruffy has been very clear in saying she's responding to, for example, the Jean Rees character, Antoinette Causeway, right? That all white people are not crazy people destined to the attic. And, they're all white Caribbean people don't think the same. But I think if you want to really discuss what it is to be a white Caribbean person, you shouldn't skirt around the issue of slaveholding. I think I would have been more convinced that this is a proper treatment of what it is to be white in the Caribbean if her ancestors had been slave owners, and if that was part of the guilt she had to grapple with. And you also have to grapple with the fact that not only were your ancestors slave owners, but you are related to all these Black people in the village. Arcadia Rain, for her, that is not a difficulty. She doesn't seem to be grappling with the fact that her cousins are underlings. She doesn't seem to have a problem with that. But I think that I'm not a white Caribbean person, so I can't say that this is that white Caribbean people are particularly concerned about this. But I think you can't escape the whole matter of slaveholding and of benefiting from being the descendant of slave owners if you are going to talk about the condition of white Caribbean people.
And Paula and Kesso or Roger and Eric. I mean, Eric, you are not in the Caribbean, and you're not from the Caribbean, but I know you have a similar type of.
I think Eric will disagree with you about that. But anyway,
well, fair enough. But what you're talking about, Arcadia? When you let's bring Priscilla into the frame here, and Priscilla speaks with no water in her mouth, right? I am fed up of this. I am fed up of seeing these people up on a hill owning everything and just wanting us to compromise. You know, it's a point of frustration. It's the same point of frustration when Black people are forced to look at statues of people who were their enslavers. This is the same thing. This is the same thing. We have to look at the statue of Lord Nelson. Big debates in Barbados as to whether we move it or not. It's an obvious thing to me, but clearly we are afraid of our own shadow. This, Priscilla, is not, you know.
I really agree with you there, Tony. And I think, you know, we all started talking about how much we love this book, and now we're like, now the claws are coming out. But there was this, but there was that. And my big but actually would be the character of Priscilla being, from the beginning, petty, mean-minded. She's an unlikable, unsympathetic character. From the beginning, we understand she's not someone that is going to be helpful or constructive in any way. She's the biggest threat to Akaya living a happy life and being free. Yet she's also the only one, as you say, Tony, who points out the truth of the situation, the reality of the situation, in very stark and clear terms that none of us would argue with. You know, and I think that's a really, again, it's a license. You know, you're an artist, you get to write the book, you get to choose who says what. But why is she the one who confronts Arcadia straight in her face and tells her about herself in ways that we all enjoyed? Let's not pretend. We liked it. She told the white woman what was what. We were like, that's right, Priscilla. It was the only thing that she did in the book that we agreed with. But why, you know, there are so many other characters in the book that could have given that same speech and we would have all been like, I mean, it was true. I'm sorry, Arcadia Rain, but you had to hear it. You know? So that was another of the choices that I was just like, why did the mean-spirited person have to be also the honest person? Is there something about polite society that she's trying to make a comment on? That only the person that's willing to be kind of unpleasant in all other ways is the one that's going to truly confront power and speak truth to it? Does she have a problem with activism? Like, what's going on here? I was really curious about that particular choice.
Yeah,
unfortunately, we have to take. Hold that thought, Eric.
I'm holding the thought.
Take the break. No, we can come back to it. We can come back to it after the break. Thank you.
Keep calm. We're online now. Thousands of local content for your viewing pleasure. Live. Boom. IKTV. Tune in. Get interactive. Get involved with WhatsApp or Instagram. Interact live. Party from home. Subscribe, follow, send us your voice notes. Check us out on Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, or call us live in studio. Be where the world is going. Stay home and connect online. Boom 1069, IKTV. Join the evolution. It's all about you. Connect now.
This is your boy Daniel Loveless representing for IKTV channel 112. Be sure to check it out. If you didn't know about IKTV, well, now you know.
Welcome back, viewers. When we took the break, Eric was dying to tell us something. So I'm going to ask him to go ahead right now.
I am enjoying these
Eric?
points about, yes, I'm enjoying these points about Priscilla. And I just have one quick point to make about Priscilla and why I think Ruffy chose her to lay out those invectives against Arcadia Rain that we all enjoyed. And I'm testifying. I enjoyed the cussing. I think Priscilla comes across as someone who's unowned and unbossed by Arcadia, because the others are her relatives, and in some respects, they are dependent upon something of her largesse. So I'll leave it like that.
So
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just to jump in here, I'm wondering if Priscilla was being portrayed in the context of the angry black woman syndrome, which I think I might have a bit of a problem with, because throughout the story she's presented as uncouth, almost in the Bahamas they would describe someone like Priscilla as a junglist. It's like a very loud, ghetto loving drama, and I might have a problem with that stereotype, especially when you compare it to Miss Rain, Arcadia Rain, where she's presented throughout the story as very calm and always trying to resolve drama, especially when she came down to the pier after the night after they caught the mermaid. And then it's sort of throughout the story, Miss Rain is saying, I don't collect rent on my land. And I have a problem with that, because that's downplaying history and making it seem as if she's doing the people of Black Conch a favor. So that's sort of my perception of both of those characters in the story.
Yeah, I know I raised this kind of points, but I'd now like to come back to it and say, yeah, I do think Eric, I agree with you. There's a sense of Priscilla's the only free person in some respects, because she doesn't owe she doesn't owe Arcadia Rain anything apparently except rent, which she doesn't collect, so she doesn't really owe it. And the rest of, like you say, are her relatives. I think it's interesting to compare the character of Cece, because the Cece character is the lady who owns the bar, and she's also, and it's supposed to be that her and Arcadia together like run Black Conch. Yeah, and I'm not sure. I'm just gonna come back to the character of the mermaid, Ikaya. Has anybody figured out how to pronounce that? Because one of the things I liked about her was, in some ways, the same kind of thing that you liked about Priscilla, that she's, in some respects, quite an unlikable character. The way that Monique draws her. Monique, she's not my friend, but Madame Roffrey, the author, draws her. Because I don't know if anybody remembers, the very first description we have of her is that she's plain so. She's not supposed to be this stunningly beautiful woman who seduces. She's actually quite unattractive or very average. And when she comes to David's home, we discovered that she smells terrible. She doesn't clean. And her hygiene is really problematic, actually. And she's kind of the anti-woman in some respects, because she completely is not this kind of image we have of this stereotyped ideal of a woman who is domesticated. She's the absolute opposite. She's used to running wild in the sea, and there's something, and we're repeatedly told that being on land actually makes her smaller. She's a smaller person than she was when she was in the water. And I think that's also an interesting choice. So although I wasn't a fan of what she did with Priscilla, I do agree with you, Roger, that she turns her into this angry Black woman that is very problematic and stereotypical. You do get shades of welfare queen with her many fathers and no husband. There's, in a way that with Arcadia Rain, her child is born of love, and he's a child of love, and he's a child of love, But Priscilla's children are just, this man is her father and that man is the other one. You know, like there's some very problematic things that we could talk about. But she also similarly kind of plays with stereotypes with the mermaid, who on the one hand is the center of the love story, but on the other hand is quite atypical in her femininity, shall we describe it?
All right. At this point, we're going to play a video clip just so that you have a feel of the book. Apart from outside of us telling you about the book, we want you to hear directly from the book so you can assess for yourself whether this is worth your while. I'm telling you it is worth your while, but hear it from yourself, for yourself. Francine Clouden is also a member of Caribbean Book Club, and she pre-recorded this clip that you're about to hear.
Hi, I'm Francine. I'm originally from Grenada, but now I live in France. I'm going to read a part in the book where Ikaia the mermaid is speaking about learning English. Miss Rain teach me the language of Black Conch Island. She said it was a type of English parlance. She teach me like she teach Reggie, her own son, born with no language. So we had that in common. I had forgotten mine, thousands-year-old language, vanished from my mouth. Miss Rain tell me her son born deaf when she catch measles. Weeks pass, learning words like give and take, like peacock, like jamet and mamagai. Like all of what these things mean. Speech is freedom. I begin to speak as much as possible. Couldn't shut me up, say Miss Rain. I ask her many questions. How is your house made? With wood and cement. Who is the chief here, the cacica? She told me I am. Miss Rain is not a cacica. She told me her family own a part of Black Conch Island, but that is not the same thing that cacica means. Miss Rain teach me plenty things, and new words too. Son of a bitch, in a nutshell, table, chair, heart, wajan. I asked why everybody in Black Conch is black-skinned. She told me how Black people came. I asked her, where are the red people like me? She told me they were mostly all dead and gone, murdered. I learned from Miss Rain how the Castilian admiral murdered all my people in a very short time. My people long dead. I sobbed. She told me many Black people were murdered too. I asked if the Spanish Christians own everything now. She said not anymore and turned red in her face, like the whole thing happened in a short time. Only 500 years when the world is very old. This all happened quickly. My family own all of this part of the island, she say. Land is not to be owned, I tell her. Strong pull all the time away from land back to the sea, but I never want to go back there. I want to stay my woman self, even here when my people long dead. I want to be here on land again, but deep inside, I know there is still some mix-up. I am still half and half. Half woman and half cursed woman. Cursed still in this new place. Same all over the place. The sea is a strong pull, but I want to stay human. New words, Chanette, dance, dog, cake, because, broken, love, family, mango chow, good night.
I hope you enjoyed that, Francine. Now, our next question is, did any message that the novel put forward resonate with you? And if so, what was that message? Raul J, you are at the top of my screen, so I'll start with you. And not only what was that message, but what was the message and why?
I think the message that really stuck with me was that even though we might have in the Caribbean gained our respective independence from our countries, we still have a cloak of colonialism, over us, and that we're not truly free as yet. And that's because within the Caribbean itself, there are things that we have to confront as people, and it's not necessarily just from people or what I would call the white planted class still affecting us, but also we have things among our own local populations that we have to confront as Black people as well. But within the story, I think the legacy of colonialism really stuck with me, and what I would call white guilt, because throughout the Caribbean now we're having the case or the argument for reparatory justice, and a lot of people say, that was 300 years ago, and which really isn't true, and we should forget this, and it's our ancestors who enslaved your ancestors, and we didn't do anything about it. But you have to ask yourself the question: if people didn't stand up and end this scourge in the Caribbean, these people who now claim that it was their ancestors who did it and not them would have been in the same position doing it to us when we look at it. So I think that is what resonated in the book, and I draw that reference because of Miss Rain and her perceived what I would call white guilt, but I felt like she didn't go far enough on that guilt, and she was basically trying to downplay her role in the oppression of the people of Black Conch.
Eric, you want to take that question on? Did anything in particular resonate with you, and why?
Yes, I felt pain, pain in what we've already talked about regarding Priscilla and her vehemence toward Acadia Rain, but everything that Acadia Rain and her people represent. I felt my own pain in terms of dealing with the legacies of enslavement, and also, like you, Paula. I mean, I've taken buku DNA tests, and it's painful when I see the descendants of slaveholders who own my people, to see them and their third and fourth cousins, but they know I exist, and they don't reach out. They're not trying to reach out. They're not engaging history as they should, and trying to repair the breach. So that resonated with me a lot, especially when Arcadia was being featured in the text, and I did feel a little bit of I didn't believe the type of resolution that was even purported between her and Life, for example. If I were Life, I would have kept on stepping, And I know I got this boy, and I want to be a good father, but yeah, I can't stay in that house. So a lot of pain.
On that note, Tony, did any message from the novel resonate with you, and why?
I like the message that the mermaid brought. I can't pronounce her name, Kessoa. So I'm not even gonna try. I like the message that she brought. It was about the simple way of life. Just from the reading that we just listened to about Priscilla owning land, and the mermaid saying, but land is not to own, and that comes over very subtly, but it's profound. Before we were colonized, nobody owned land. Everything was communal, and we almost need to get back to the sharing economy that people talk about, as opposed to I own this, you own that, and so we measure ourselves, juxtapose where we are in society versus you, me. That was profound for me. Her connection with nature,
Mm.
was also a profound message for me. Being able to smell, use all her senses to tell you what's going to happen next or what's likely to happen. Um, I remember 2 generations ago that my grandmother used to be able to tell me when it was going to rain from the smell, right? So that sort of thing, um, I found as profound messages in the context of how we're living now, and wanting to forget that we are still one or should still be one with nature.
Kesawa, how about you? Did
The
any
message, I think,
particular message of it? Okay.
I was
Go
ready.
ahead.
The weight of history. I think that what I thought she does beautifully, actually, and despite my I don't like this and I don't like that. Actually, one thing I loved about the novel, particularly on first read, was how she really paints in very simple ways to the people that inhabit Black Conch that all Caribbean people walk under the weight of history and grapple with that and have to grapple with that to find a way forward where we can all be happy, free, and live in something that resembles a space that is just. For me, that was what really hit home. And we've talked a lot about the politics, but this novel is a love story. The message is that true love conquers all, and we can and I don't want to spoil it more than that, but also the other message that really resonated, well, I think is quite powerful, is the idea of what does freedom look like for a woman. Because on the one hand, there's this message that true love conquers all, but on the other hand, it is her attraction to this man that gets her in trouble in the first place, and it's spending too much time with him and enjoying his love too much that creates more problems towards the end of the novel. And so there's a real question about what marriage means and what freedom looks like and what love looks like, and how love binds people whether or not they're actually physically together. And I think that we see that in both Rain and Life, Arcadia and Life, but we also see that with David and Archaea, who remain connected even long after she has, what happens in the end that I'm not spoiling. Yeah, so that's a bunch of different messages. But for me, one of the things that really struck me was the legacy of history and the fact that all Caribbean people, remaining indigenous people, Black people, white people, and we haven't talked about it, that she does kind of point to this idea that there are two types of white people. There are the types that have long-term descendants, and then these new whites, these Americans, these nouveau riche types who are just there for the money, and they are a new plague upon the Caribbean. And that's kind of interesting because I believe that her family are actually her family are recent immigrants, the author's family. They're not people that owned land or slaves a long time ago. I think she's like a second generation Caribbean person. So I was interested that she was willing to kind of draw those lines. Right. And so that was kind of an interesting thing that she drew, because we talked earlier about how she kind of copped out by not having Arcadia be descendants of slave owners, but actually she does point out that there's this new, there's nothing Caribbean about the new whites either. She's very quick to point out. Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer.
All right, we may have already covered some of this, but my next question is, did anything about the novel make you uncomfortable, and why? Eric, you're at the top of the screen, so I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, the very early on with the fishermen from United States, especially the older man, I didn't like him from jump. Nothing about that man endeared me to that character. I did not like him. I wanted to hit him. I'm not a violent person, but I really wanted to punch him in the mouth. So his character and what he represented disturbed me, because he represented neo-colonialism, which I despise. Neo-colonialism directed toward Caribbean islands and Caribbean people. So And I think she did a good job in that because she really, yeah, that character really raised my angst.
All right, Raul J, you're next on the screen. Is there anything that made you uncomfortable? And why did it make you uncomfortable? What was it and why?
So very briefly, I think what made me uncomfortable actually happened on the very first page of the book. I probably shouldn't have said that, but anyway, and it was the whole presentation of David as a man with dreadlocks and him smoking marijuana. And for me, it might just be because of the generation I was born in, that I found that a little strange, because especially for the audience that the author is writing for, living in the UK, and she'd have a large British audience. It sort of perpetuate that stereotype that firstly, that Black people smoke marijuana, and as a university student in the United Kingdom, that is one of the questions that I've been asked, and it also perpetuates the whole thing about people with dreadlocks smoking marijuana, and sort of downplays an entire religion. But I'm not going to get into that. So I think I found that reference a little bit much, but I also understand where the author was coming from, because you're trying to sell a story, you're trying to sell a book, and you're looking for your audience as well. And so, depending on the people who she expects to read the book, and she wants them to relate to the story and not be disconnected from her story, I would understand putting references like that in the book.
Tony, you want to take that question on? Did anything about the novel make you uncomfortable?
Well, quite a few things. The first thing, Paula, is the sexual attraction to a fish, and that is what the mermaid was until until the transformation. But I understand why it's there, but it was just a little cringy for me. Then there was the stereotypes that Roger just mentioned. I felt a sense of this perpetuation of the mandingo type Black man, good in bed, well equipped. I just felt a sense of that on some of the things that were written about. I don't know if I'm being too sensitive about that, but I don't like that. I think that is something that's kept us back as Black men. While we think it's something to wear on our chest, but we're regarded just for our bronze and not our brains, and I don't like that stereotype. So the moment I sense it, I feel uncomfortable about it. So yeah, that's.
Let me challenge you on that, though, Tony. Let me challenge you on that, Tony. How
Go right
about the
ahead.
fact that she represents? How about the fact that she represents David as this very loving man? That is certainly a positive representation of a Black male. How about the fact
And that was good.
she represents life, right? She also represents life as not wanting to live off of Arcadia Reign. He wants to make his own way in the world. So he feels trapped by her wealth and her privilege. So he goes away to make a way for himself. It's also problematic in that he abandons her when she's pregnant and their child.
Which again, I mean,
life is complicated. Life is complicated.
Yeah. So there were good moments, Paula, and good representations of who we are. But if you really slip in between the pages, you'd find that tendency. And I don't know if the author. The author is a human being, flesh and blood person who's lived the Caribbean experience as well. So let's not forget that. But like I said, Paula, I agree with you. I agree. David is a good portrayal of what a loving, caring man should be. Not to give away as Cheswa says, don't spoil it. But look at what he had to do when all that stuff he had to clean when he was, furtively keeping the mermaid from everybody else. Where she was doing that transformation. I would be, if I was David, I'd run miles. I think somebody mentioned the stench. I think it was you, Cheswa. That's a lot to put up with. But he was in love with that mermaid from day one, from the time she surfaced. Come here, Dudu. Come na, Dudu. Dudu is a very endearing word in Caribbean parlance. So look, Paula. David is a lover man. Okay.
Except if you're Jamaican,
David is a lover.
else.
Let's leave it like that. Okay.
All right.
David, not
tell
me.
you what makes me uncomfortable.
I am probably very rough at the edges. I'm not calling no mermaid Dudu.
Okay. Time is running away from us. So let me just very quickly say what made me uncomfortable. I thought there were misogynistic undertones in the novel. I am very uncomfortable with the fact that this novel is premised on the premise of this novel is that women cursed a woman just because she was young and beautiful and men liked her. I think that is intrinsically misogynistic. Ikaya says at one point, I frayed man, but I frayed woman more. I don't see how that could be anything but misogynistic. So that is my major reservation about the novel. And then that takes us to our last question. If you were to rate this novel out of 5, how would you rate it and why? Raul J, you're at the top of the screen.
So I think I'd have to, from the original read and listening to the discussion now, I'll have to stick with a 4 out of 5. I say that's a high rating because it was a page turner, again, pun fully intended. And, it was an easy read. I read it within a matter of maybe 5 hours or so. And I loved there were some references in there that were very accurate and, were well written. There were some shortcomings to the story, but they overall did not, take away from the whole message in the book in such an extent that I'd banish it to the do not read again section of my bookshelf. So I say 4 out of 5.
Okay, wonderful. We need to go quickly. Eric, you're next. How would you rate it out of 5 and why?
5 out of 5. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was challenged. I was moved viscerally. So that's what I look for. Does it make me feel a certain way, or does the story make me feel emotional on different levels? So it did that and had me thinking about it for days after that. So 5 out of 5.
Kesawa?
4.5 out of 5. I loved it. I love that it brought so many different elements of Caribbean culture to life, Caribbean history to life, and it did so with a celebration of the Caribbean and the way we are together, apart. I really enjoyed this novel. 4.5 out of 5 happily. The only missing half point was because I feel like the treatment of black women was a little bit left out. But other than that, it was wonderful.
Tony, very quickly.
Very quickly, 4 out of 5. Readable.
Yeah, Tony,
yeah, 4 out of 5. 4 out of 5. Characters relatable, easy read. Like Roger, some shortcomings. There were some things unresolved in my mind.
I have to cut you off, Tony.
But it was good.
I have to
4 out of 5.
We're out of time. Right. So 5 out of 5 for me. I know that I have pointed out a lot of its shortcomings. I am rating it from my emotional response to it. 5 out of 5 because it was brilliant art. Please join us for the next broadcast of page turners. The next time we talk about page turners, we're going to talk about Leonie Ross's This One Sky Day, which is known in the United States as Poppy Show. Thank you for joining us.